The music library has a non-circulating score area that includes collected critical editions of the works of a number of important composers. What is a critical edition? A critical edition is a score edition that has been prepared with careful attention to scholarship, using primary sources such as autographed manuscripts, first editions, composers' letters, and similar documents to try, to the extent possible, to present the composer's original text without editorial interpretation. Where editorial judgments have to be made, a critical edition will clearly distinguish the judgment of the editor from the text of the composer, and often give alternative possibilities so the reader can have as much information as possible. A critical edition is not designed primarily for use in performance, but is designed to facilitate informed study of the piece. These collected critical editions are monuments of musicological scholarship, without which a deeper understanding of the works of past composers would not be possible. Collections like these normally take teams of scholars decades to complete. The first of these collections were undertaken in the 19th century, and this kind of work still continues today. As editorial standards and historical scholarship have evolved over time, some composers have been the object of multiple collected critical editions. It can be difficult for the uninitiated to find a specific work in one of these collections. This video will discuss navigating collected critical score editions using two complementary tools. The works list in a New Grove biographical article, and an electronic database called Index to Printed Music, or IPM. We will start by looking at the New Grove Works List, a useful resource in its own right. Since no two works lists in New Grove are exactly alike, we will examine a representative sample, the works lists for Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, and Schoenberg. We will look at what they have in common and ways that they vary. Along the way, we will introduce IPM as an additional resource that we can use when the works list does not offer the information we need. If you are not already familiar with the New Grove, you may want to watch a separate tutorial using the New Grove Dictionary of Music and Musicians. At the end of a biographical article on an important composer in the New Grove, before the bibliography, you will find a list of the composer's works. This is the works list for Johann Sebastian Bach. The works list may be organized in various ways, but is generally divided into sections. In this case, the list is divided into 10 sections. Each section is divided into subsections as judged appropriate by the scholar who has prepared the list. You may notice that in this works list, vocal genres are grouped toward the beginning and instrumental genres are grouped later. Note that the works list in the online version of New Grove is organized in essentially the same way. At the beginning of the works list is a description of the most important collected editions of the composer's works. In this case, we see a reference to the older Bach Gesellschaft edition prepared over the course of 48 years in the later 19th century, referenced in the works list with the abbreviation BG. We also see a reference to the 20th century edition commonly known as the Neue Bach Ausgabe, abbreviated as NBA. This collection was begun in 1954 and remained unfinished at the time the New Grove article was prepared for publication. The works list references some forthcoming volumes. Also at the beginning of the works list, the most important thematic catalogs of Bach's works are given. These are the Bach Werke Verzeichnis of Wolfgang Schmieder, first published in 1950 and most recently revised in 1998. This is where all our BWV numbers come from. And the Bach Compendium of Hans Joachim Scholz and Christoph Wolff, begun in 1985 and not yet complete even now. These two catalogs are referenced in the works list by the abbreviations BWV and BC. You may notice that within each section, works are listed in order of their BWV number. Let's imagine that we want to find a critical score of the aria Heute noch from Bach's Cantata BWV 211, Schweigt stille, plaudert nicht, also known as the Coffee Cantata. We go to the works list, find the section for secular cantatas. Then follow the list of BWV numbers until we come to 211. So far, so good. Under BG for Bachgesellschaft, we find the reference volume 29, page 141. Taking the appropriate volume from the shelf, we turn to page 141, and there is our cantata. A few pages farther on page 158, we find our aria. Let's imagine further that we want to find the same piece in the Neue Bach Ausgabe. Next to the reference for the Bachgesellschaft, we see this reference for the Neue Bach Ausgabe. The Neue Bach Ausgabe is divided into series and volumes, so this tells us to look for Series 1, Volume 40, page 195. We go to the shelf, we find the Neue Bach Ausgabe, locate Series 1, find Volume 40. And on page 195, we find our cantata. On page 212, we locate our aria, Heute noch. Let's pause for a moment to take note of two things. Number one, we need to know how to read Roman numerals. For this, there's a trick. Remember the word medical. It has 4 consonants. The first, M, means 1000 in Roman numerals. The second, D, means 500. The third, C, means 100. The fourth, L, means 50. Second thing to notice, we could not have found Heute noch had we not known that it was part of Cantata 211. We must often have this kind of basic information before we can locate a piece. Fortunately, it's not hard to find. Sometimes we may encounter a reference to the NBA enclosed in square brackets, as for example with Cantata number 209. That means that this volume was not yet published at the time the works list was prepared, but the planning was far enough along that the publisher was able to say what the contents would be. Note that the brackets are also present in the online version of the New Grove, which means that regrettably the online works list has not been updated to reflect the fact that the last volume of the NBA was published in 2007. In other cases, we may find ourselves looking for a piece whose reference in the NBA is not given at all, such as the organ fugue in G minor BWV 131A. Under Bachgesellschaft, New Grove tells us that this piece is in volume 38, page 217, and so we find it is. Under NBA, however, we find nothing at all, just an empty dash. Here again, the online version of New Grove also lacks this information, even though all volumes of the collection have now been published. In this case, we may have recourse to another tool considerably more current than either version of the New Grove. This is the Electronic Database Index to Printed Music, or IPM. Access IPM by going to the library website library.du.gr. and typing IPM under Databases. Click on Index to Printed Music and authenticate with your 87 number and passcode. Once inside IPM, you can search a variety of author, title, keyword, and other fields. In this case, we might enter the search terms Bach, 131A for the BWV number, and Neue in order to search for a reference in the Neue Bach Ausgabe. Clicking Search will return one match, and when we click on that, we learn that our organ fugue is in Series 4, Volume 11, page 3 of the Neue Bach Ausgabe. Going once again to the shelf, we find Series 4, locate Volume 11, and turning to page 3, we find our piece. IPM, though it does not have all the information in New Grove, and despite some inconsistencies and gaps, is generally fairly current, and if searched correctly, can help you locate a piece in a collected critical edition. Now that we've toured the Bach works list in New Grove, let's look at a couple more. The Mozart works list shows a number of similarities with the Bach works list. Where the Bach works list was divided into 10 top-level sections, the Mozart works list is divided into 20. We see an organization that begins with sacred works, proceeds through stage works, and continues with other vocal works, ending with instrumental works. As with the Bach works list, the editions are described at the beginning. They are the Werke, completed in 1905 and abbreviated as MW for Mozart's Werke, and the Neue Bach Ausgabe Sämtliche Werke, abbreviated as NMA for Neue Mozart Ausgabe. Note that because of the complicated organization of the NMA, made up of series, Werkgruppe, and Abteilung and Band, a key to reading the references is supplied. The thematic catalogs referenced are the 1862 first edition and the 1964 sixth edition of the Kirschel catalog of Mozart's works, the source of all K numbers. Note that where the two numbers differ, pieces are listed within each section according to their number in the sixth edition of Kirschel. Let's imagine that we want to find Mozart's String Quartet number 4 in C, K157. Since the library does not have the older Werke, we will focus on the Neue Mozart Ausgabe edition. We go to the works list, find the section for chamber, and the subsection for string quartets. We locate the piece by the Kirschel number and see that the NMA reference is Series 8, Werkgruppe 20, Abteilung 1, Volume 1, page 41. Going to the shelf, we find the NMA, locate the correct volume, and find our piece on page 41. Like the Bach works list, the Mozart works list will not always give us the information we need. Were we to need the Neue Mozart Ausgabe score of one of the solfeggios for voice, number 385b in the 6th edition of Kershaw, we might be stumped. This information is not available in the print version of New Grove, nor in the online version. Here again we may have recourse to IPM. Following the example that worked so well for us with Bach, we enter Mozart, then 385b for the Kershaw number, then Neue for Neue Ausgabe Sämtliche Werke. IPM returns 2 matches. The first is not helpful. But the second match gives us page 172, volume 5, Abteilung 1, work group 1. It doesn't give us a series number. But when we go to the shelf, we find that the volume we want is in series 1. Page 172 is the last page in the volume, and it shows us Solfeggio number 2. The Beethoven works list is another we may encounter in our studies. Here the composer's output is divided into 22 separate categories. This list begins with instrumental genres and leaves vocal genres for later, an appropriate organization for Beethoven. Note also that one of the top-level categories is works of doubtful authenticity, whereas for other composers, doubtful works are often a subcategory within each larger category. 3 editions are listed at the beginning of the works list. First, the original 19th century edition with a long German title, abbreviated as GA for Gesamtausgabe. Then, a later supplement to the Gesamtausgabe, abbreviated as HS for the editor Hess. Then, the Neue Ausgabe Sämtliche Werke, begun in 1961 and abbreviated NA for Neue Ausgabe. Note that the words Neue Ausgabe Sämtliche Werke do not appear on the title page of volumes in this edition. However, the editor's name, Schmidt-Gerg, does match. We will imagine that we want to find the score to Beethoven's Symphony No. 3 in E-flat, Opus 55. Orchestral music is the first category, and we find on examination that compositions are listed within each category in order of date of composition rather than by opus number. We easily locate Symphony No. 3 and find its reference in the Gesamtausgabe is Series 1, No. 3. We find the correct volume, and the page numbers help us find each number within the series. We quickly locate the correct piece. Now we turn to the Neue Ausgabe, but we find that the New Grove is no help. Apparently the volume containing this piece had not been published at the time the article was prepared, and information on its contents was not available to the author of the article. Once more, we will turn to IPM. Following our previous procedure, we enter Beethoven, 55 for the opus number, and Neue for Neue Ausgabe. In this case, however, our search fails, for of the 2 matches returned, neither one references the collection we are looking for. To understand this, remember that the words Neue Ausgabe Sämtliche Werke do not appear on the title page of the volumes of the edition. What does appear quite prominently is the word Werke, so we may try substituting that term in our search where we previously typed Neue. Now our search is successful. Our first match tells us to look in Abteilung 1, Band 2 on page 1. Sure enough, there is the Eroica Symphony. The Franz Schubert works list shows up a few wrinkles we haven't seen yet, so let's take a look at that one next. The Schubert works list is divided into 14 categories, beginning with theatrical works and ending with doubtful and spurious works. What does spurious mean? In this case, it means something not authentically by Schubert, even though it may sometimes be attributed to him. 3 editions are listed at the beginning of the works list. The first is the older Franz Schubert's Werke, abbreviated as SW for Schubert's Werke. And the second is the newer Franz Schubert Neue Ausgabe Sämtliche Werke, abbreviated as NSA for Neue Schubert Ausgabe. Both citations give a key for parsing the series and volume numbers in works list references. This is especially important because the Schubert's Werke and the Neue Schubert Ausgabe numbers are here listed together in one column. The third edition listed is Pollak's critical edition of Schubert's theatrical texts. It does not include scores, and we will not address it here. The Music Library owns both the Schubert's Werke and the Neue Schubert Ausgabe, but our copy of the Schubert's Werke is in a modern Dover reprint of the original, a fact that will be significant when we come to search in it. The only thematic catalog mentioned for Schubert is Otto Deutsch's catalog, cited here. This is the source of all those D numbers you always see with Schubert's pieces. Within each category, pieces are listed in order of their Deutsch number. Of the 14 categories in the Schubert's works list, the largest is naturally the songs. Because Schubert wrote so many songs, there's a special index of songs within the works list, where they are arranged alphabetically by title and text incipit, with their Deutsch numbers given for reference. Let's imagine now that we want to find Schubert's song Gretchen am Spinnrade. We'll need the Deutsch number to find it, so we'll start with the index to the songs. We can find it alphabetically by title, or if we only have the first line of the text, Meine Ruhe ist hin, we can find it with that. Either way, we see that the Deutsch number is 118. We then go to the listing of the songs, go down the left side until we come to 118, and there we find the song we're looking for. Scanning to the right side of the page, we see a volume and page number for the Schubert's Werke, but no series number. We find the same thing for the Neue Schubert Ausgabe reference, which begins after the semicolon. The answer to this lies back here at the beginning of the song section. We're informed here that all the Schubert's Werke references in this section are found in Series 20, and all the Neue Schubert Ausgabe references are in Series 4. Now we can look at our reference and see that the song we're seeking is in Schubert's Werke, Series 20, Volume 1, page 191. There's another complication though. I mentioned earlier that we have this edition of Schubert's works in a modern Dover reprint. This reprint allocates the dozens of volumes of the original edition among just 18 new volumes, plus a volume of commentary. So we must consult a chart printed in the beginning of each Dover volume to see which original volumes map to which Dover volumes. This tells us that Series 20 Volume 1 is found in Dover Volume 13. Now we can locate page 191 in that volume and find our song waiting for us. This matter of reprints is an important data point to keep in mind. The music library also has the Chrysander edition of Handel's works in a reprint by the Gregg Press, and the Michael Balling edition of Wagner's works in a reprint by the Da Capo Press. We also used a reprint when we consulted the older edition of Beethoven's works. All of these reprints play around to some extent with the original order of the volumes. Back in the New Grove, remember that the small Roman I, comma, and Arabic 10 following the semicolon in our works list reference tells us to look in Series 4, Volume 1, page 10 of the Neue Schubert Ausgabe. No mapping problems here. We can go straight to the right volume of the shelf. Locate page 10, and there's our song. The last works list we'll look at is for Arnold Schoenberg. This list looks a little different, but it is mostly the format that has changed. It's not uncommon to find a more condensed works list like this in the New Grove, and it can still help us find a piece in a collection. We see first that the list is divided into categories, just as we're accustomed to. Here there are 7 categories of musical works in addition to Schoenberg's many writings. Works seem to be listed by date of composition within each category. The standard collected critical edition is cited at the beginning, just as we are used to seeing it, and it's given the abbreviation S. Now let us say that we want to find a score of Schoenberg's opera Moses and Aaron. We find it under Operas, and at the end of the entry we see S followed by A/8. Now, the Schoenberg Sämtliche Werke is organized by Abteilung, Reihe, and Band, but we quickly find that we can locate the correct volume without the Abteilung number. Reihe A, Band 8 is Moses and Aaron, and it forms part of Abteilung 3. On the other hand, if we wanted to find Schoenberg's stage work Erwartung, the New Grove has nothing to say on where to look. Once more, we'll go to IPM. We can search with the name Schoenberg as one term, the title Erwartung as another, and the word Sämtliche for Sämtliche Werke as the third. IPM returns 2 matches. The first we will see is for the opera. The citation tells us to look on page 3 of volume 6. There is no Abteilung or Reihe number. But we're pretty smart, and we figure out right away that all the Reihe B volumes are devoted to critical commentary. So we look in Reihe A, Band 6, and there's our piece waiting for us. So let's look back on where we've been in this little tutorial. We've learned how to use the works lists at the end of the New Grove articles on Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, and Schoenberg to find works in the collected critical editions of those composers. We've learned to watch for curveballs in reprint editions, learned that some works lists have information at the beginnings of sections that we need in order to know where to look, and learned that some basic information about a piece may be necessary before we can successfully look it up. We've also learned to use index to printed music as an alternative tool for accessing scores in these huge collections. No need to be afraid of them anymore. Collected critical editions are now just one more tool we can use to learn about music.